Ms. Graham.
Thank you. Mr. Little, before lunch, I was taking you through some statements, but we didn't have hard copies. I think you've now been provided with hard copies, and they should be in your blue folder.
Oh, then the folder, right, my apologies.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
I'm going to begin by looking at Kevin Nelson's statement, which is PIRC 00019.
Thank you.
And this is we've heard evidence from Mr. Nelson. It's a statement that was taken on the 5th of May 2015 at 1900 hours.
Yes.
And it was taken by Karine Pattenden. We spoke about her a moment
Yes.
short before lunch. He was a key eyewitness, I think you said.
Yes.
He was one of only 2 civilian witnesses to the incident, Ashley Wise and Kevin
Yes.
Nelson. Now, we've heard evidence from Ashley Wise that she gave an initial statement on the 3rd of May, and then PIRC went back and spoke to her on the 5th of May.
Okay.
And looking at Kevin Nelson's statement, we see he was spoken to by PIRC on the 5th of May, but he was not, they didn't go back, PIRC didn't go back to speak to him until the 26th of August.
Yes.
After that. Now, I was wondering why, after the officers gave statements on the 4th of June, why there was no return to Mr. Nelson to maybe explore in further detail issues regarding the incident once you were aware of what the officers were saying?
I think the after the officers gave the statement that the area that was not, say, potentially not covered in Mr. Nelson's statement was in relation to the alleged stamp on PC Short. Yep. I think the first statement, and I'm sorry I've not a chance to read it here, I think the first statement makes mention that he saw Mr. Bio punching the police officer who we know to be Nicole Short.
That's correct,
And
on page 3.
I think he stuck her about, he mentions more than one punch, I think, if I
does.
recall. I can't remember if they said they all struck or not.
It's on page 3. You can actually see it at the bottom of the
Thank you.
page there. I believe he struck at her with his
Yeah.
closed fists at least 3 times. That's the section of the statement. So he commented on the punch, or the lunge, as he put it, in his first statement, the one on the 5th of May.
Okay, so I'm reading that there, and after he says, with his closed fist at least 3 times, I heard her scream out, so I cannot be positive, but I believe that at least one of those fists struck her. Yeah, right. That was the point I was, right. He then says, at this point I decided to go to the front garden to have a closer look. I do not know why I did this other than being curious, so he left his front window to make his way to his front door to go out into his front garden. I believe it may have taken me to 10 to 20 seconds, that's a fairly big time gap. I exited my house front and stood looking over my gate. And this time the black male now appeared to be face down in the pavement. So, he's telling us there, he hasn't seen the stamp, he's not had the opportunity, to, by omission there, he's not had the opportunity to see the stamp, because he said himself, he left from the window he was looking out of, and he made his way through his house and out his front door into the garden. So, I understand the point. I understand the point you're saying. So why didn't we go and actually get that written down in writing?
Yeah.
Right? I understand what you're saying, but the decision was saying, well, we don't need that. The statement covers why he can't see the stamp, the alleged stamp. Right? The statement covers that.
I suppose I'm wondering why you didn't think it might be worthwhile to go back and ask him specifically if he'd seen the stamp. It may have assisted the officers to know that there had been a stamp, an alleged stamp by Mr. Bio.
The principal officers?
Yes.
I wouldn't have told them that.
No, I'm not asking you if you would have told them that.
I wouldn't have told them that.
But obviously you're investigating the circumstances,
Yes.
whether they favour Mr. Bio or they favour the officers. And it may be that this sort of information might have favoured the officers. You've talked about justifications for use of force.
Yep. Things
happened after these events. Would it not have been worthwhile to go back and perhaps put to Mr. Nelson, we've got statements from officers, they mention a stamp. Did you see anything of that sort?
At the time, the decision was made not to go and re-interview him because it felt it was covered by, quite clearly covered in his statement. We also had the opportunity when there was an additional statement taken off him, but as I said, my recollection of that statement, again, I think it's in here but I haven't read it, was that was in relation to, shall we say, another matter, right? Not with
Yes.
events of the 3rd of May, right? Events that occurred later, you know. So I know, but again, I go back to the phrase that I used on Friday. We're sitting here in hindsight, but at that time, and that information, to me, that was quite clear that he couldn't see the stamp. Okay, he couldn't see the stamp.
And having gone back at a later stage, you've got a copy of the 26th of August
Thank you.
statement. I know you've not had the chance to read it, but it doesn't cover any of this information.
No, that was my recollection. It doesn't.
Yeah. Looking back now, do you think that might have been an opportunity to discuss the versions you'd had from the officers with him to get more information from him, or did you think that wasn't necessary?
Well, obviously, sitting now with you questioning me on this matter, then yes, it was an opportunity to do that. But the decision at the time was that it wasn't felt necessary to do that because, to me, it's quite clear in there as he looks out the window, he sees 3 punches being thrown, he thinks one connects, and then he leaves. He talks about curiosity. He then leaves, and he's not in a position to see what's happening outside.
All right, thank you. Sticking with Mr. Nelson's
Yes.
first statement, 5th of May. So this is 2 days after the incident, before you got statements from the officers. Have you
Yes.
got that one?
Yeah, sorry, 1-9.
Yes. Could you look at page 2 of that
Yes.
statement, down towards the bottom? It says, when this male started walking along the road, he appeared to be acting as if the police were not talking to him. He ignored everything that was being said. My view was clear. I would say the male was about 30 yards from me, and at this time he did not appear to be carrying anything in either of his hands. Now, you've given evidence that on the 5th of May, the briefing was still being used, the briefing paper which made mention of he was holding a knife above his hands going towards the officers. Do you remember looking at the briefing paper?
Yes,
When you saw this paragraph in Mr. Nelson's statement to PIRC, what action did you take? Because up until that point, the briefing was that Mr. Bio was clearly seen to be holding a knife at Hayfield Road. And this seems to be a contradictory statement from one of the key eyewitnesses saying he wasn't holding anything in either of his hands. Did you take any steps in relation to that?
Well, that was us now in the process of what the investigating doing. You know, we had next to no information on the 3rd. I was provided with a briefing paper on the 4th that contained what we now know to be inaccurate information. Then the investigatory process is to gather the evidence and identify and this, obviously. Now, when I read this, I don't know if I read this, I don't remember, was it the 5th of May, 1900? So that was when they started taking that statement. So I wouldn't have read this till at the very earliest, the 6th of May, or maybe even the 7th of May, when it had been processed through the incident room. Yep. So, but yes, I absolutely agree with you. That is then now telling us that that we have an eyewitness to say he wasn't carrying anything in his hands when the police first engaged with him. So yes.
Can I just be clear about one point? You may have read this statement at a subsequent event. What about the conversation you had with Investigator Pattenden? How long after she took this statement did you discuss Kevin Nelson with her? Because as you've said, he was a key eyewitness. Did she raise or draw to your attention this issue about the knife and Mr Nelson not seeing anything in his hands.
I can't recall that aspect of it. I can't recall, sorry. And when, you know, I did discuss with her the statement because it was, you know, we're quite like saying he was a key witness, one of the only eyewitnesses we have to the incident, you know, independent eyewitnesses.
Would you have expected her to draw that type of thing to your attention?
I would have, you know, but likewise, you know, it's, you have to see things in writing, you know, written down to know it's in evidence, it's been captured.
Right. So even if Miss Pattenden had said, I've taken a statement from Mr Nelson at 7 o'clock tonight, he voluntarily gave that statement, you would want to see it in writing before you relied on it.
But it was nothing. There was nothing to rely on. We had a briefing paper, and that's what it's brief information to give you a kind of outline of what's happened. You know, we later identified that information within it was inaccurate. That, whilst disappointing on reflection, is not a huge surprise because the principal officers had given no statements. They'd made no initial accounts. They'd provided no basic facts. You know, so we're working on information there that, yes, well, you'd expected it to be reliable. You've got to take the caveat that nobody provided any evidence, as I would describe it, and actually, you know, the PIM didn't hand us basic facts, the PIM didn't hand us initial accounts, the officers didn't provide statements, you know, so this, is, to me, is all part of the investigatory process and all part of the evidence gathering, and then actually analysing the evidence and seeing where that evidence is taking us, which as an investigator is what we would do.
Right, thank you. Before lunch we also spoke about Inspector Stephen Kay.
Yes.
And we've provided you with a hard copy of his statement. Now this is PIRC 00345.
Sorry, I'm at the wrong one there, sorry, I'm at a follow-up statement. Yes, thank you.
And this is a self-penned statement.
Yes.
And it's undated.
Yes.
We've heard evidence from Inspector Kay that we heard evidence from him on 23rd of November 2022, and his evidence was that this self-penned statement was prepared within a week after the events.
Okay, yep.
And as I said before lunch, he was the PIO.
Yes.
We've heard evidence he was listening to airwaves in real time when the incident was taking place. I think you see at the bottom of page 1 that he mentions that he was PIO for the following day's business.
Yes.
And that took him on to the 3rd of May. If we can move on to page 2, please. Now, we've heard evidence from Inspector Kay, and we also have the benefit of airwaves transmissions, show that
Excuse me.
the police arrived at Hayfield Road at 7:20 and 23 seconds in the morning, and Inspector Kay arrived at 7:40 and 54 seconds. There's an airwaves transmission from him saying, I've just arrived.
Okay.
So he was the PIO in regard to this incident.
Yes.
And on page 2, if we look at paragraph, I think 6, or it starts, I then heard on radio transmissions.
Yes.
More calls had been received regarding this male brandishing a knife at vehicles, and he was still walking about the streets. And at this time I heard Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell request an armed response vehicle and dog unit to attend.
Yes.
Due to the severity of the reports, we've heard evidence that they were grade 1, immediate threat to life. The request was not acknowledged, and it took several attempts to receive an acknowledgement stating contact was made. I immediately realised this was a very serious report of which officer safety and public safety was at risk.
Yes.
And then I was aware via radio that PCs Peyton and Walker had arrived at Hayfield Road. I had the suspect in sight, and almost immediately I became aware of the emergency button on the airway terminal being activated. I then heard shouts for assistance similar to officer down, and an officer was injured, possibly PC shot. So he was listening in to the calls,
Yes.
the airway transmissions as it was happening. He was aware it was very serious and officer and public safety was at risk. And you've told us about the difficulties with airwave transmissions and collecting them and
Yes.
gathering them in. Would it have been worthwhile going back to Inspector Kay in light of his involvement in the incident and his role as PIO to flesh out some of the detail involved in what had happened and the course of events? Because at this moment in time you don't have police statements.
I would say possibly in respect to that, but you have to bear in mind that we've got all these other aspects that we're looking at. You know, we're not the biggest team. I think the other day I identified principal roles, and that took up about 20 of our staff.
Yes.
So it was one of the points that was always at the back of the mind. Who have I actually got to go out and do inquiries? Because I've got a CCTV, I've got a house-to-house team, I've got people dealing with it. Yes, the post-mortem's over, but we're now dealing with the SPA, the productions.
Crime scene management.
Crime scene management and gathering information there. We've got our office up and running and trying to ensure to put in place the kind of protocols within the kind of office. So there's really time critical investigations you've got to do, or you will lose evidence. Yeah. So taking this one aspect in hindsight and saying, why didn't we go and take that, is I can't answer that definitively just now. Why not? Okay, but as I said, you've only got the resources you've got. You have to make the best use of them. You know, house to house is really important, because you may spring up another Kevin Nelson, another Ashley Wise. So we have to ensure that's getting done. People aren't just sitting in their houses waiting for us to arrive. You know, so you're spending a lot of time back and forth to different houses, trying to get somebody in, trying to get some response. So I understand your question, but to me it's been taken in isolation. And actually, you know, how do you do this? You know, now whether or not that was a rationale for not doing it at the time, we didn't do it. You know, I presume by your questioning, and I can't remember Stephen Kane, I can't remember his statement. We did go and take another statement from him. I see there, it was actually myself that took that statement, because that caught my eye when I was doing that.
That was on the 12th of January 2017.
And I'll go back to just before lunch when I say I think Stephen Kay was one of the officers identified by Crown for a re-examination.
Right.
Yes, so that was instruction for Crown, and I think that, you know, there was the kind of Crown there a wee bit of the catch-all, you know, when you're looking for Crown to kind of, you know, but I don't think that was one of the aspects. It wasn't. One of the aspects that what I was going back to speak to him about was about a briefing regarding threats that had been raised, apparently, and it was to try to establish that. So with regard to your question, no, it's obviously not something we've done. You know, otherwise you wouldn't be questioning me on it. But Crown haven't asked for it either.
And you've explained on Friday about issues with the resourcing, and I'm wondering, would you have, if you'd had the opportunity or had the resources to appoint someone to go through statements as they were coming in and identify possibly further useful lines of inquiry, is that something you would have liked to have had?
I did have somebody doing that. That was Ian McIntyre was doing that.
Right.
Now, there was only Ian McIntyre and Laura White plus admin support, because the statements get typed into Clue. The statements are written statements, and then they're typed into the Clue system at that time. And Ian part of the function within a major incident room is you'll have a statement reader or a number of statement readers who will go through the statement, and they'll identify areas that will, you know, that potentially need further examination. So there was somebody doing that.
But he didn't think in relation to this statement that there should be any further actions?
Well, No, obviously not, because there's no further action to do. It's not like I'm presuming, and again, you know, we're all these years later, I'm presuming there's not been an action raised like there was for Leslie Bowl, and I've referred it or deferred
Yes.
it, you know, so obviously not. But in defence of Ian and such like as 3 people in an instant room, I think my last major investigation when I was in the police, a Cat A murder, we would have about 12 people in an instant room.
Doing that job of
Doing
reading
different jobs,
statements
you know, so
and-
you've got an office manager, an action allocator, a statement reader, a researcher. You have all these kind of functions. Okay, we were multitasking here.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not saying I'm not saying I agree with you here in respect of that. Yes, I agree. Would that not been a good idea? But you have to say, right, what's the priorities? What we're trying to focus on? And at that time, when this statement came in, and when we actually got possession of it, you know, although he penned it on, did he say the 5th or the 6th or something?
I said that his evidence was that it was penned within a week of the events.
Right, okay, but when did it come to us? You know, because did it come directly for us the day after he penned it? You know, I remember I talked about this transition of information coming to us. It's not just a case of, there you go, there's your information. It was a transition information, and Ian McIntyre, as office manager, was meeting with his counterpart to get the information passed over.
How long would you normally expect a self-penned statement from a PIO to reach PIRC?
Depends on the size of the investigation, I have to say.
Well, in this case,
Well, he's not penned it. Well, he's saying he's penned it within a week. So
Within
they were
a
talking.
week.
So they were talking 7 days from
yeah.
a PIO. Now we serve notice on Police Scotland that we want information. It would have been operational statements from all officers. You know, you'll have that letter in your system. You know, when? I think it went on the 6th, or the 5th. It went. You know, so that's a serving notice in the police. You need to give us this. So just because an officer says they penned that statement doesn't mean we actually get physical of that statement to read it and examine it and decide what's to happen.
So when would you expect a statement, a self-penned statement from a PIO?
I would expect it as soon as possible from a PIO.
Right.
Yeah, but how long is that? You know, an example I'm giving you, he's saying he did it within 7 days, so we could be saying the 11th before he's typed it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you didn't have statements from the officers at this time.
No.
Could you look at page 3? And you've explained the difficulties that caused for PIRC. Do we see on page 3 that Kay he attended the incident at Hayfield Road. He was there about 7:40 and 54 seconds. And we see there he said, I was then further briefed by Acting Police Sergeant Maxwell. And you'll see a section within his statement, if we can move up the page, where he talks about who was initially involved. He names officers,
Yes.
what they were doing. They were holding the male down by asserting their body weight onto the male at various points, a recognised method of gaining control. And he talks about things that Maxwell informed him.
Yes.
The male ran at officers. He was given the command to stop and get back. After a similar command, the male refused. Officers deployed their PAVA and CS spray. The male displayed no effects and did not stop and kicked PC short to the ground by swiping her legs, thereafter kicking her to the head. And he was restrained and leg restraints. Now, leaving aside for one moment issues about whether that is accurate or not, there was obviously a discussion between Kay and Maxwell.
Yes.
Maxwell was the acting police sergeant for the response team that day. Would it have been worthwhile, looking at it now in hindsight, would it have been worthwhile, in the absence of having statements from the officers, going back to Kay and maybe fleshing out more detail with regard to what Maxwell had been saying?
I think I said earlier, I can't disagree with that, just sitting here now.
And not disagreeing with me now, does that mean that you agree that would have been helpful to the investigation if someone had had a further conversation with Inspector Kay.
Yes.
Thank you. Can we move on to, just for completeness really, move on to the statement that Keith Hardy gave. This was dated the 27th of May 2015. I think you'd mentioned it before lunch. Detective Chief Inspector Hardy, it's PS 00667. And you see it says it's, again, a self-penned statement written on the 27th of May 2015. And I think, as you said before lunch, it mentions him attending the mortuary.
Yes.
It mentions him having a meeting with you on the 5th of May. And it mentions him receiving a request from PIRC to make contact with all officers who were known to be involved in the arrest of Mr. Bio and establish whether they were willing to provide an operational statement.
Yes.
And that related to all of the officers. As you see during his, that's the statement that he prepared. It's 3 pages long. And I think you said before lunch that you didn't feel that there was any more detail, further detail required from DCI Hardy in that regard.
That's my recollection, yes.
And then you mentioned minutes of the forensic strategy meeting, and I think we've provided you with a hard copy of those.
Thank you.
This is PIRC 04161. And it was a meeting dated, minute taken on the 12th of May at 14:40, and there's a number of people listed as being present, including yourself, Mr. McSporran, and a number of other investigators, and the pathologist, Kerry-Ann Shearer.
Yes.
And others from different departments.
That's correct.
Can I ask you to look at item 4, please, which is on page 3? And I think you, sorry, it's item 5 actually, subheading 4, it's this page, thank you, page 3. And item 5 on this, in this meeting, was forensic examination and priorities, and number 4 says PC Nicole Short's body armour to be examined for possible footprint. Do you see that?
Yes, yes.
Any footprint found to be compared with deceased's footwear, which was seized at Victoria Royal Infirmary, Kirkcaldy, at the time of the recovery of the body. And it mentions the left boot, the right boot, and Nicole Short's vest.
Yes.
And it mentions photographs were to be taken. So this was obviously part of the discussion at the meeting.
Yes.
Was this indicative of the outcome and the result of the discussion? So was it a discussion about the items and then a decision taken that the body armour, as it's called there, or the vest as we've known it, to be examined for a footprint? Was that the instruction that was given to the forensic scientists?
No, that's a discussion about how best to a minute of how best to proceed with the instructions. Actually, would be on the submission. I would suggest that the submission form to the SPA in respect of each item, because it's not to say that, you know. So who was there from? Somebody there from Mark Enhancement. Yeah. Oh, so Judith Archbold there for Mark Enhancement Lab. Right. Yeah. So that's not to say that she would be undertaking that examination. She's just there representing that department from within the SPA.
Right.
So I would suggest the instruction would be on the submission, the forensic laboratory submission form that would be submitted.
Right. When you had this meeting,
yes,
on the 12th,
yes,
did you discuss whether or not fingerprint testing should be done on the vest?
Well, we've obviously not done that, no.
No.
No, because is there an R, sorry, just quickly glancing through the section, is there an R section on fingerprints? No. So I would suggest, if it's not in the minute, we haven't discussed it.
I don't see anything.
No.
I'm interested specifically about fingerprinting of the vest.
Right.
So if that wasn't instructed, did you consider instructing them not to do fingerprint testing, given, as we're aware, the use of this black powder can have an impact on woven material and be to the detriment of later tests?
I don't recall that. I don't recall that.
So your expectations in relation to item 4 there,
Yes.
what did you think the forensic lab was going to do in relation to the footwear and Nicole Short's vest?
Well, it would obviously it would be photographed prior to examination, so that's obviously, reading that now, my expectation of that is that we're ensuring that we record what is the mark on the vest before any forensic examination is undertaken, because as you quite rightly said, it could be I'm going to use the word damage, but you know, the mark could be damaged by, so you want it photographed before that, and then for them to to you know, carry out an examination. What method they would do to do that, I don't know. That's their expertise, and vice versa. That's where I would be relying on particularly Gary Sinclair and John Ferguson, who are both very experienced scene managers, and because they were liaising with the forensic lab. It wasn't myself. I know you said the report was sent to me. I wasn't liaising with the forensic lab. I put in place that, and in principle, it was John Ferguson was liaising with the lab in relation to all the examinations that were undertaken, and there was quite a lot, you know, as you'll be aware of how many examination reports that they have.
Right. Was it part of that discussion whether they would be doing DNA testing
On the boot?
on the boots or the vest?
On the vest? No, I don't recall that.
No. Would
Can I just say as well as I'd be expecting, if that's the area, if it's what area of expertise that is, I'd be expecting them to advise us what could be done.
And did they?
Because you know, you can have a crossover between you know, DNA and fingerprints, and you know, but who's best to do it. So it's not just a case of like John chairing a meeting saying we want this done, we want that done. Right, okay, we have a mark in his vest. How best can we proceed to identify if the mark is relevant to the boots worn by the deceased?
And did the forensic scientists present give advice to you about what tests could be done, what order they should be done, what they could achieve with the vest and the boots?
Round about the boots? No, I can't recall. Sorry, I can't recall.
Did they give you any advice about the potential impact of carrying out fingerprint testing and the use of black powder and the impact that would have on the vest?
I can't recall. Can I just ask, was the vest fingerprinted?
Yes, we've heard evidence that the vest was fingerprinted.
Sorry, I can't recall.
And we've heard that as a result of that, there was black powder on the vest, which had an impact on the material. And I'm interested in, you know, what help for you from the perspective of PIRC and the investigation you were carrying out at that time, what help would fingerprint testing have been in relation to the vest?
It would be to try and identify who'd been in contact with that vest. You know, the challenge being that vest was lying about the muster room, or the room, in my recollection's right, it was lying about in the area where the police officers were taken after for the PIP process.
And how would that have helped your investigation, knowing who or that someone had touched the vest?
I would suggest, unless it was Mr. Bayou's prints that were on it, that the officer, any other officer could have carried the vest at any time.
Right. And where would that have taken the investigation?
I don't know if it would taken anywhere, because they all work together. So you know, you know, moving somebody's body armour about, you know, in a car, in an office, I don't see, at this time when I'm saying I don't see any huge relevance in it. Yeah.
We've not heard any evidence in the inquiry that Mr. Bio put his hand on the vest or touched the vest or anything of that sort. But
No.
so perhaps not entirely relevant to the investigation.
No.
Did you consider or discuss with the forensic scientists the possibility of testing soil?
No, I didn't.
Or
No, I didn't.
The substance?
No, I didn't. I'm aware of that. I think the inquiry got that. No, I didn't.
Yes.
No.
Was that something you were aware of at the time that was possible? Or?
I was aware that soil sampling, you know, is available, but I don't remember it coming up. As I say, this is not a case of John and I dictating we want this, we want that. We're looking from, you know, input from the experts to tell us this is what we can bring to the table.
Right.
You know, I have to hold my hand up, bearing in mind this is 2015. I left the police in 2009, although I did some work for another policing agency, you know. But this is, you know, so science moves at a very fast rate of knots, you know. So.
Did you feel that you were reliant very much on the forensic scientists keeping you up to date with what could be done?
I felt, yes, I felt I had a knowledge gap. I hold my hands up to that, but vice versa. That's why I've got John Ferguson and Gary Sinclair. That's you know, relying on them in respect of that.
Right. And looking back now, do you think there was maybe an opportunity for additional training? Would that have assisted you at that time?
Well, shortly after this, and it was on my training, we went for a forensic awareness day up at the SBA.
I think that was in your paragraph 6
Is
of
it in
your
my training
inquiry
aspects?
statement.
Yeah.
Remember at the beginning of your evidence on
Yes.
Friday, I think it was paragraph 6. It may have been
Yeah.
421.
Now, my recollection is that was arranged by Gary Sinclair.
Right. Could
Okay.
we maybe just go to paragraphs? Here it is.
Yep.
So, if we could see, here we are, 2017 to 2018, Forensic Awareness
Yeah.
Day at SPA Gartcosh.
Yeah, that's it.
Could that
Could-
have been it?
Yeah, because that's it. Because the Police Scotland run a crime scene managers forum, and not saying it was me, but Gary was like our lead scene manager. So one of Gary's objectives was to see if we could become part of that forum, and so we would be sitting and we would be hearing updates. We'd be aware of what new techniques would be available.
What was that forum called? Sorry.
There was I think it was Crime Scene Manager
Crime
Forum.
Scene Manager Forum.
And Gary had interaction with the SPA in respect of trying to go on it from their side, and also with, I can't remember who was the lead in Police Scotland at the time for scene management.
And ultimately, did PIRC get a seat at the table of the Crime Scene Management
I don't
Forum?
think we got a seat at the table. I think what we got is we were included in any circulars that were coming out from Gartcosh SPA in respect of forensic developments.
Right. And have you found that to be of assistance up until your retirement?
I couldn't say if I found assistance, but what I'm hoping for is like somebody like Gary or John would be, you know, they would be more forensically aware than what they've previously been.
Right. Thank you. I'd like to move on and ask you some questions about the 3rd of June. This is the day prior to the officers giving statements. Can we look at paragraph 171 of the inquiry statement we have on the screen? So this is the day before, and it's mentioned, you're asked about a generic interview plan
Yes.
that was completed by Investigating Officer Sinclair. Is that Gary Sinclair?
It is, yes.
And your response there is, Investigator Sinclair is a trained interview advisor, so I had approached him to create a generic interview plan in preparation for when we could get to interview the attending officers. This was unusual and is not something that would regularly occur. I reviewed the generic plan which was to be used, and perhaps we could have a look at that generic interview plan. PIRC 04182. And if we look at the very top of that page, do you recognise this as the witness interview strategy?
Yeah, the generic, well, yes. For
And
the,
is that just another name for the generic interview?
yes, that's the
plan?
witness interview strategy, yes.
And this related, the names of the officers are on the front page.
Yes.
So it's to cover the strategy for all of those officers?
It was to cover the 9 officers, yeah.
And you've said that Investigator Sinclair was trained in relation to preparing strategies, is that right?
Yeah, he's a trained interview advisor, yes.
Can you explain to the Chair a little bit about that role? What's involved with an interview, a trained officer?
Well, first of all, I'm not a trained interview advisor. That's one of the kind of newer concepts that's come through in the police, but it's where you have what could be a kind of lengthy interview covering a wide-ranging area or a wide-ranging investigation, and it's to pull together in a structured manner and covering areas that you wish covered. It's not saying ask this question, ask that question. You know, it's not a kind of question. It's areas to be covered. It's also used, maybe more used for suspect interviews or accused person interviews, as we have now, in respect of that, and they talk about the kind of different phases, you know, in relation to that. So it's to considering all the aspects and yeah, to prepare a kind of areas to be covered.
Now, you've told us that Gary Sinclair was trained and
Yes.
was qualified to do this.
Yes.
And you're not trained and qualified
No.
to do this role. And I'm wondering if you felt at the time you knew what Gary Sinclair's role was and how to get the best out of him in relation to this interview strategy.
I'll go back to the point I made a wee bit earlier, as the PIRC staff are all multitasking.
Right.
So I've got Gary kind of leading the scene manager, along with John. I've got Gary leading in productions, because all that stuff's going. You'll see that he's taking statements from people, and then when we were advised that the officers were going to make themselves available, I asked Gary, as I think at that time Gary was our only trained interview advisor we had, so I asked Gary to prepare this interview for that. I also remember that, and I can't remember, I was just having a wee flick through before that, and it's and the question before that is, on the stage John Mitchell met with representative of the SPA and it was agreed that 9 would provide statements. Right, I was looking for the date for that, because my recollection is that to be told, Gary wasn't too happy with coming doing that, because I was giving him very little notice to prepare this. On reflection, there should have been work ongoing almost from the start by an interview advisor preparing, you know, because there would come a time we would get this, but we hadn't done that, and that would be an oversight on my part, because I should have put that in place. But as again, you know, as I said, we're kind of multitasking, we're all over the place, and I remember Gary wasn't, you know, he was a bit like, gee, thanks, in respect of that. So I did say to him, I don't want one for each of the individual officers. I want a generic to cover the areas that we've been looking at, I was also, you know, I gave him a timeline, because I needed it in time to pass out to the interview teams, to give them time to have a look at this and then consider what they needed to do in respect of the officer that they had been asked to look at. So I would expect him to be examining, you know, like, you know, different records, see what part did they play at, when were they made aware of that, because by the time we got that, we were into understanding what was in the airways, we were into understanding what was in the CCTV, you know, we were creating these kind of timelines that we have around about that. So, yeah, so...
How much time did Gary actually have in the end to prepare?
Well, that's why I was looking
strategy?
to see when Mr Mitchell was made aware that they were going to make themselves available.
Well, my understanding is that it was on the 2nd of June, but we've not heard from Mr
And we
Mitchell.
did it on the 4th of June,
And the interviews took place on the 4th of June.
so he had a day.
He had, and that's the time Gary had.
Basically had a day, yeah,
Right.
which is not ideal. Oh,
No.
yeah.
And do you know from your awareness of this role, is there a recommended period of time for? No.
I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge about that.
Right. Now, I don't know if you were able to watch any of the evidence I took from Mr. Harrower.
Saw some of it,
Did you
not
see
all of it.
some of it? Did you see any part of it where I went through this interview strategy
No.
with them? Right. Well, please have a look at the interview strategy. You've obviously
That's right.
said you recognise it, and that's what Gary Sinclair prepared. And when I was asking Mr.
Sorry, do you have a
Harrower,
copy of it?
well, if there's not a copy in your folder, we'll look at it on
No,
the screen.
sorry, not a copy of it.
So that's page 1 names the officers, and page 2 is a summary of the events.
Yes.
And this summary indicates, if we can look at that, in the middle of the page, it was reported that as the officers drove into Hayfield Road, they saw the male walking towards them. He may have been in possession of a knife, and then there's a comment, it may be that the knife was discarded before this. So Gary Sinclair is mentioning this in
Yep.
the
So he's taking
summary.
cognisance of the additional information. As I said, we've been actually evidence coming in.
Right. So it may be that he's taking cognisance of, for example, the statement of Kevin Nelson.
Yeah.
The officers exit their vehicles. It was reported that the male punched, then kicked Nicole short. Some officers drew their police-issued batons. Some drew their Pava and CS sprays, which were subsequently sprayed towards the male, but believed this had little effect. So it appears that there may or may not have been a knife in Mr. Bayo's hands. The officers responded to that drawing their batons, and some using sprays. So again, comparing that to the briefing paper dated the 3rd of May, again there appears to be a suggestion that the aggressor, if I can call it that, the subject, was approaching the officers, perhaps with a knife or perhaps without. But they responded to that using batons and sprays.
Yes.
And then if we can carry on moving through the document, you'll see that the next page should say purpose of interview, and it talks about carrying a planned and structured interview of the police witness to achieve a detailed account of their movements, intentions and actions. Do you see that?
Yes.
The intentions is part of it.
Yes.
And does that relate back to seeking, we've heard that officers have to justify every use of force, every individual
Yes,
use of force?
yes.
Thank you. And then moving on, background of officer, some details of who they are.
Yes.
Introduction, and this sets out, description of officer, some preliminary personal details. Moving on, introduction, asking officers in their own words to say what sort of happened first. What happened first? Keep going. Asking about a muster. Asking about incident attendance, where they were when they heard the call, how they became aware of it, and how they travelled to the incident. Did you see all of that?
Yes, I do.
Please ask me to stop if you
No, it's okay.
need more time. And then arrival at locus. Describe what you saw when you arrived at the locus, what Mr. Bayo was doing, wearing, was he in possession of anything? There's a map referred to.
Yeah, I remember that, yes.
Initial dealings with deceased. Did you get out of the vehicle? What did you do? And these questions are focused on what the officer did, what the officer said, and what the officer heard.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing here in this section about dealings with the deceased that relates to intentions or the mindset of the officers, or that seeks justification for their actions. Now, would you not have expected to see some sort of questioning about that in the interview strategy?
Well, it says at the start, you know, that there is the phrase the intentions. I agree with you. It's not included in that area. But I would expect the investigators who were taking statements of the officers, to clarify if something, did anyone else go out the vehicle? Well, why did you do that? Did you approach Mr. Bayou? Why did you approach in that manner? Did you approach why did you approach in that manner? This, as I said, this was generic, and I would expect investigators not just to ask these, but to flesh out round about that.
There's no questions about why did you use force at that point?
Yeah.
Why did you use your baton? Why did you use your spray? Why did you not use a less forceful method, tactical option? Did you consider and preclude other less forceful tactical options? Those could also be generic questions asked of all officers, but they haven't been asked at all.
Okay.
Do you think, on reflection, those questions should have been included in a witness strategy?
If they're not included in the witness strategy, I would expect it to be fleshed out in the statement.
Why would you expect the witness strategy to ask the question or prompt the officers, did you get out of the police vehicle, but not include a question that asks for a justification for use of force? I mean, do you think on reflection it would have been wise to have questions about justification for use of force?
Yes, because we were now sitting, yes.
And then other questions relate to post-arrest and medical care, post-incident procedures and other ancillary details. There's
Sorry, could we go back up to
yes,
counties, if you don't mind?
yeah,
Sorry,
not
just
at all.
go up to the section round about. Now, so there's the question round about arrest and restraint. So is there nothing in there about? There is. Did you use your PAVA CS spray bat and handcuff during the incident?
Yes, but it doesn't ask why.
Yeah, but that was I was. This is very generic, prepared in a hurry, right? But I would expect then that would be like, well, why did you do that? Because as I think, as I said on Friday, the officers used everything in their toolbox, or whatever expression that they had, that day. So I would fully expect, well, why did you use your CS spray?
So your expectation would be that perhaps as a supplementary to that question, did you use your PAVA or CS spray, baton, handcuffs or leg restraints during the incident? If yes, when? No question, if yes, why? But you would have expected officers to have asked why?
Yes.
Right. And would your expectation be that all investigators taking statements that day would have known that they should be asking questions about justification?
Well, they should be, yes, because it is, it's part of the role that we undertake is, is it proportionate, necessary, justified?
All right, thank you. There's something else missing from the strategy, and that is questions about race.
Yes.
Sitting here now, looking back at the witness strategy, if you were keeping an open mind about race, is there any reason why there wouldn't be specific questions directed towards motivation, bias,
as you
racial
said,
discrimination?
that's sitting here now. Yeah, a primary focus of the public inquiry is the race and how much did race play a part in this. Okay. Now, although I think I answered in my Rule 8, I've said that that we were trying to be mindful of race, but we'd never received an instruction to investigate race until about a month after that. The matter of race had never been raised with myself or Alistair or John although I wasn't at one of the meetings, but I know the meetings I was at by the family, that race played a part in this. You know, and actually the first that race was mentioned by, when I say the family, and I'm going to include Mr Anwar in aspect of the family, was at a meeting that we had when the family and Mr Anwar came and met with the former commissioner. And the phrase used at that time was, can we talk about the elephant in the room?
Was that in early September?
That was in early September, although we had received an instruction from Crown in July in respect of race. Now, John and I were trying to, you know, everybody was trying to keep an open mind, you know, about race. But when I briefed Gary about this, I don't recall saying to him, you need to put matters of race in here. Gary's looking at what we've been instructed to undertake, the instructions we'd received at that time, and he's mindful of what evidence we have coming in, and he sat and prepared that. And if Gary was sitting here now, he would absolutely say, I didn't have enough time to prepare that properly. I'm quite certain he would.
Right.
Yeah, you know, but we're sitting in hindsight here, but the reality of it, if Mr Mitchell was made aware on the 22nd, on the 2nd, and we were interviewing the officers on the 4th, and we had to get all that organised, and I'd said to her, I need a generic witness strategy to assist the interview teams.
Right, you've given me a lot there.
Sorry.
No, not at all. We've heard evidence that obviously Mr Bio died.
Yes.
He was in contact or in custody of the police, and he died after that, and he was black.
Yes.
And we've heard police officers indicate that those factors made it likely there'd be high interest publicly,
Yes.
a lot of media attention, and that the issue of race, bearing in mind some officers said they're aware of events in England, down with the Met, in America, that race would be a big factor. So we've heard evidence from officers
Yes.
about that. Are you suggesting that it was PIRC's expectation that unless the family raised race, you wouldn't be dealing with it at all?
No, I'm not saying we'd be mindful of it. We'd be mindful, but I go back to the kind of the legislation in respect of PIRC as Crown instruct us what to investigate. And we never received an investigate, you know, to investigate the matter of race until July.
I'll come back to that because
Yes.
there may be an issue about when you were instructed by the Crown. It may,
Oh, right, okay.
and we'll come back to that. We'll
Okay.
look at the letters after the break.
Yeah.
But am I right in thinking that your authority and your power and PIRC's authority comes from a Crown Office instruction?
Yes.
Unless it's something to do with the Chief Constable, but in this case we're looking at
Yeah,
Crown
it's a
Office.
Crown instruction.
But is it possible for PIRC to contact Crown and say, we would like you to instruct us to look at this, so that you have the authority from the Crown, but you could instigate that instruction or encourage that instruction?
Well, we could. I would say my involvement with Crown was at a fairly low level, for want of a better expression.
Yeah.
You know, there was discussions ongoing. You know, the circumstances you give, I would say that is maybe more pertinent where there's not been the same interaction between PIRC and Crown, and there's maybe been, you know, as we go along, as we go along, we identify something and we realise that requires or should form part of a different instruction. Maybe we would go to Crown and say, would you consider it that should be instructed to us? And that, but in this instance, we have, as I said, I did a 7-day paper. I think I then did a 3 or 4 week paper to Crown, you know, highlighting where we are, what we're looking at, what are the issues. At no time did anybody come and say to me, you know, I'm instructing you to investigate race, you know, at that time. We were trying to be mindful of race, and I'm aware, just for the points you've laid out, that race was playing a part here, particularly around about the media attention, and you know, but yeah. So there's a number of factors here. Why is race not in there? I don't recall specifically briefing Gary to include race, because I'm certain if I had, he would have included it there. Yeah.
But as far as you're concerned, at that time, when you're taking statements from the officers, there's no instructions from
No,
Crown.
as far as I'm aware, there's no
That's
instruction.
my understanding.
Yes.
No instructions from the Crown to investigate race. So
No.
it wasn't a specific part of your terms of reference. So although you're saying PIRC were being mindful of it,
Yes.
would that, in a sense, restrict your ability to pursue an active line of investigation in relation to race?
Yes. Yes. Sitting here now, yes. I would. Yes, I would say so. Yes. You know, now bearing in mind, my recollection is we got a further instruction from Crown. Was it on the 2nd or the 5th of June? And I remember the wording of the instruction was concerns have been raised by the Bayou family in relation to the following matters.
I'll come on
Right.
to
But
the...
none of them say race in that instruction.
I'll come on to the instructions.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the...
So we took a 15-minute break at this point. Miss Graham.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you about when you became aware that the family had concerns about race as perhaps being a factor in the death of Mr. Mayo. And before the break, I said there's some issues
Yes.
about when you were actually instructed by Crown. But if we can begin with some preliminary issues, we've heard evidence in the inquiry that on the 3rd of May, when the family were speaking to Mitchell and Parker, who were the officers who delivered the death message,
Yes.
that there had been discussion about race at that meeting, that the family had raised concerns about race and in particular had made reference to recent events at that time in Baltimore in America involving, I think, the death of a black man. Now, was that something that you were ever made aware of when you came in on the 4th of May?
No, I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
Had anyone discussed with you at that stage or at any stage that the family had raised this issue on the 3rd of May?
No. No, that was not part of the briefing that I received. I don't know what's on in their statements either, these officer statements. I don't know if is it raised there? I don't.
Well, I'm interested in your awareness.
Yeah, I understand that, yeah, but-
Lead investigator, was that ever drawn to your attention?
No, no.
Had it been drawn to your attention, what would you have, you've said you were mindful of race, what would you have done in relation to that information?
What would I have done in respect of that is, A, would have raised it with my senior management, because there you have the family of a victim who perceiving that race played a part in this incident. So that would need exploring, because one of the things that would happen would be is during the course of the family being spoken to is to establish with the family as to why they perceive that as race being played a part in this incident. So there would have been a course of action in respect of that, and I would have expected my senior managers to raise that with Crown in respect of the referral, bearing in mind we got an additional referral on the 5th. Well, we got the referral on the 5th, but then the terms of that referral changed from the verbal instruction. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if that had been brought to your attention, that's something you would have raised with both your line managers or management of PIRC.
Yes.
And the Crown?
Yes. Well, I'd expected the managers to have raised that.
All right. So.
Yeah.
And which manager do you think you would have raised it with, or would it have been more than one?
Well, if I'd been made aware of that in the 4th, and I think I'm a wee slightly at odds with yourself, because my recollection is John Mitchell was in the 4th, but I think
Well, we've not heard from him.
Yeah. But definitely Irene Scullion would have been there, so that would have been because that's the family identifying that they perceive race as an issue, and so we would be required to take that forward. Right.
And required to take it forward, that would be to Crown, would it?
Well, yes, and the first thing would go to Crown in respect of that. But my understanding of if a victim or any person, identifies race as being an issue within or a factor within an incident, then we have to accept that. We have to take that forward. And my understanding is we need to notify Crown about that. Right. Is my understanding of that, and also my understanding is that we need to establish why they perceive that, and that was not a line of inquiry that was pursued by the PIRC. It was not pursued by the Flows. I didn't instruct them or ask them to pursue that.
Right. But if you'd been made aware that the family had raised this on the 3rd, is that something you could have pursued?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Liaising, of course, with Crown.
Yes.
And getting an instruction from the Crown?
I would have expected an instruction from them in that regard, yes.
Now, the other thing I want to ask you about is a meeting that took place involving the Commissioner, Kate
Yes.
Frame herself, and the Lord Advocate was present. It was a meeting involving PIRC and Crown Office. You weren't at this meeting.
No, I was not, no.
I understand, we've not heard evidence yet from Miss Frame
Yes.
in this regard. So I understand it took place on the 14th of May,
Okay.
and that during that meeting, the question of race was raised, and there was a note in the minutes saying this element should be looked at by PIRC. And that's my understanding of the
Okay.
position. Now, Kate Frame, I'm advised, was present. She certainly minuted as being present,
Yes.
along with the Lord Advocate, John Mitchell, Les Brown from Crown
Yes.
Office, and it was a meeting with the PIRC on the 14th of May.
Okay.
If you take that from me that that's correct, and
Yes.
Kate Frame was present,
Yes.
I appreciate by the 14th of May you were working as deputy to John
Yes.
McSporran.
Yes.
Were you aware from that matter being raised with Kate Frame, and that the PIRC should be looking into questions of race, that she raised that with you or John McSporran or anybody who was involved in the investigation?
No, I have no recollection of that. And I have to say, if that was communicated to myself, then I would have undertaken action, like you said, apart from the communicating with Crown, but I would have put in place the matter about the perception from the family as to why they considered race, because I think it would be important to understand why they considered race to be a factor. But that was never communicated to myself, and well, John McSporran, will be able to answer that. But if John had done that, we would have raised an action round about that. That's that would be in the flow. That would. I can't see how that would not be in John's decision log, and I don't think that's in John's decision log.
You're talking about John McSporran?
Yeah, John's policy log.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let me just look at the decision log. This is PIRC 04153, and we can have that on the screen, but from my looking at it, there's nothing referred to on the 14th of May that would indicate anything in relation to race had been raised with him. There's an entry on the 13th, or a number of entries on the 13th, and an entry on the 15th of May. So no entry on the 14th at all. And then decision 33 is the 15th of May, the following day. Obtain precise details of all Police Scotland communication with family of deceased. And this relates to the various different accounts regarding the death. Establish who provided information to the family, what that information was, who authorised it, where it is recorded. And it may assist the inquiry to establish what occurred at the point of arrest. And then the next entry goes on to the 17th of May.
Okay. I was just flicking here, sorry, Ms. Graham, to see if there was anything in my daybook in respect of that. What reference number of daybook is it? 7142. Lost my notebook. 452, sorry.
I think the daybook that you have hard copy of goes up to the 13th of May. So it's the day prior, unless you have the one from the 14th of May that you're looking at.
No, I don't think so.
Well, we can maybe
13th of
look
May.
that out.
sorry, was the meeting, did you, I'm sorry, I've lost it.
The 14th of
All
May.
right, yeah, 14th
So it was
of
the
May.
day after the day book we've been looking at
Right, okay.
in detail. I think you've got the copy of.
No, that,
But your notebook covers that period.
right.
And
Over and above that, if that was the case, I would still expect a written instruction to come from Crown in respect of that.
right.
Okay, I would, yeah,
I mean, I think just for completeness, in your notebook on page 6, you can see an entry from the 12th of May. And then if you go on to page 7, you'll see at the very top it's the 13th of May. And then there is an entry for the Thursday, the 14th of May. It appears to say reported on duty.
yeah. So basically, it's just I'm
And
on
then off
duty and I'm off
duty.
duty. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no entry in
no-
that.
So to that would be there was nothing
So nothing noted by
evidentially sitting
you.
like an additional instruction or,
Yeah.
or I was involved in any evidence gather, taking possession of someone, taking a statement of somebody. So I've never been made aware of that. I don't know. I don't know if we have the minutes. Do we have the minutes? Did Miss Frame get the minutes of that meeting? I don't know.
We'll hear from
Yeah.
Ms. Frame in due course, but as far as you're concerned, you didn't know anything about that.
Yes.
There's no entries in your notebook, and we'll provide you with a hard copy of the day book for the following period for
Yeah.
the 14th of May.
Something's caught my ear. I don't want to put you off your chain of thought
No,
here, but
it's
something we were
fine.
discussing earlier. Assuming you were discussing in relation to the fingerprint examination of the vest.
Yes.
Okay, I've got a note here in my day book for the 13th, and it's basically like actions, and I've got Gary
that-
Billy.
Page 7?
Or I don't.
That'll be page 7, 13th of May.
Yeah, I've got Gary Billy, and I've underlined it. So that's Gary Sinclair and Billy Davidson, who was with us at that time. And I've got prepare forms for Gateway, Production 8, Personal Radio plus Splattern, our contact, Production 51, Vest of Nicole Short, Production 166, R boot, Production 167, Left boot, for photos and examination of thread. So I've not asked for fingerprint examination because we then go into another list where I've put photos DNA dash F/fingerprints. So my instruction has not been for fingerprint examination.
Thank you.
Now whether that get mixed up, but
All right.
it's just just that caught my eye there.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. Right. So we were talking about the 14th of May.
Yes.
And you've no recollection of that
No.
being raised with you by Kate Frame or any other manager?
No.
Right. Can we look at your inquiry statement, please, paragraph 202? And I think before the break you mentioned early July or the 2nd of July.
Yes.
So paragraph 202 of 421. And you see here you were asked on the 2nd of July the PIRC was further directed by Crown Office to investigate allegations. I won't read the whole thing out.
Yes.
And then I think you say, my understanding is that this email of 2nd July 2015, now this was an email from the Crown Office to PIRC. Is that right?
Yes. I think it's an email. That's why I've said
It's
it.
an email, yes.
Yes.
It was a further instruction from Crown Office to investigate each of the 4 points.
Yes.
An allegation of criminal conduct made by Zaid Sahid.
Yes.
Investigate issues of race and conduct. Investigate allegations of potential contraventions of the Data Protection Act,
Yes.
1998. And investigate miscellaneous other matters. Can I ask you to look at this email?
Yes. Thank you.
Now, the one on the 2nd of July, as I understand it, is the 4th instruction that PIRC received from Crown Office. And it's COPFS 04808. And you see at the top it says, It's from Les Brown,
Yes.
who's in Crown Office,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sent to Stephen McGowan, PF Major Crime and Fatalities Investigation, subject Sheku. And then just underneath that, you see from Les Brown, 2nd July, 1611, to John McSporran,
Yes.
and it relates to Sheku. And if we can have a look, so is this the email that do you recognise this as the email that you're referring to? Let's go
I knew we received a further instruction, you know, yeah, I knew we were, yeah.
So let's go through this. Dear John, it's to John McSporran. Thank you for forwarding the email from Amar Anwar. Standing that the majority of points raised by Mr. Anwar were raised at a meeting between the family of Mr. Bio and PIRC investigators, the Crown consider that the extent of information disclosed by PIRC at this stage is an operational one to be taken by the Commissioner. That decision will no doubt be informed by the processes that have been applied by PIRC in relation to previous investigations and by the practices followed by the police in updating the family prior to report being submitted to the Fiscal. As you are aware, Mr. Anwar has raised 4 issues directly with the Crown. Number 1, the Roman numerals. In relation to the request to view CCTV footage, I am content that this is an operational decision for PIRC that can be responded to in accordance with your usual practice. So that relates to CCTV.
Yes.
2, the information provided in relation to the case against Nicole Short is relatively vague, and there is no indication as to the source of the information. As such, you will no doubt wish to clarify matters before deciding how to proceed. The position of the Crown is that the case against this officer is live and proceeding. So that relates to Nicole Short.
Mm-hmm.
3, in respect of the allegation concerning Mr. Said, as this appears to include an allegation of criminal conduct, this should form part of the investigations by PIRC. So that relates to criminal conduct alleged concerning Mr. Said. And then 4, I can confirm that the Crown will take responsibility for instruction of appropriate experts in relation to positional asphyxiation. We will, however, take account of any proposals that you make in this regard. I will advise Mr. Anwar that I've responded directly to you. Regards. So there are 4 items there, but they relate to CCTV, Nicole Short, Zaid Sahid, and positional asphyxia. Now let's go back to your inquiry statement. And you'll start to see why I was asked, this was paragraph 202, and you'll start to see why I was going to ask you a little bit more about the letters of instruction and what you received when. So 202,
Sorry, Miss Graham, can I just check something if you don't mind?
yes, please do, because this is confusing me and I'm hoping you can help me
I'm
understand it.
I'm a bit confused here as well, and not wanting to. I have it in the back of my head that I was on holiday over the 2nd of July.
Right.
So I'm just trying to see. See, it's redacted out here, but I have myself. I've got myself here on. Now we don't have my day book. That only runs up to the 14th of May. I think you said the 13th of May.
Yes.
But I'm looking at my notebook, and yes, sometimes there'll be a date gap in my notebook, but not at this period because of dealing with this investigation. So I have.
Can we just take a moment and get this up on the screen?
Yeah.
Now, I think it will be between pages 12 and 13 of your notebook, which is PIRC 04200. And I think page 13 does have a redaction on it, but you'll see an entry Monday. It's either the 11th of
It's
July
the
or the
13th
13th
of July.
of July.
It's the 13th of July. So you've got an entry on Friday the 26th of June.
Mhm.
And
That's
you
at
have,
the bottom of page 12.
yeah, and then you've got an entry at Monday the 13th of July.
So the bottom of page 12 is from June, and then
Yes.
if we look at the top of page 13, we'll see the entry that says Monday 13th July.
Yes.
Right. And I'm interested in the
Second.
2nd of July. Do you, from your own recollection of your notebook, are you suggesting that that redacted version relates to the 2nd of July? We can have that checked.
Yeah, if you, I think I'm on holiday that period.
Oh right, oh right. So
think-
you weren't present on the 2nd of July? Maybe.
Sitting here now, I don't think so, but on, yeah. I mean, we received additional instruction, and additional instruction is as I've listed it, and that's how we've recorded it into our final reports.
Okay.
But I believe that redaction is, I'm on holiday.
Right. All right. Thank you. We can double check that overnight.
Please. So
We'll do
I
that.
know it's still fair to say, but my understanding of the kind of, you know, when I've answered this question, I don't know if that email was made available to me.
I think, Mr Little, if we let Ms Graham work through this
Okay.
process, I think we'll get an answer.
Right. We'll come back to that tomorrow, Mr Little. So if we looked at, as I showed you, the email on
Yes.
the 2nd of July, we read that out, we've looked at it. Let's go back to your inquiry statement,
Yes.
paragraph 202. And it may be that your inquiry statement is not correct. And if
Yeah.
so, I would just like you to help us with that. 202, 2nd of July 2015. There we are. And this is where you say, this is the point at which the Crown instruct by email on the 2nd of July, and you include there, investigate issues of race and conduct.
Yes.
Now, I can't see any reference to that in the email of the 2nd July.
Okay.
So do you think your statement could be mistaken, particularly if you were on holiday on that date, about the contents of the letter of instruction from the Crown? Because
Yes.
that doesn't appear in that email.
Yes.
Right.
So my apologies. I think I've read when I've read the question that you've asked me there, and my recollection, and I will base that recollection on what is on the PIRC report.
I think this
'Cause
is
we
also
could-
in the PIRC report.
Yes, because we, my understanding is we got an instruction, and this was the areas that we were asked to look at.
But looking at the email now,
Yes.
looking at your statement, and if you can take from me that this also appears in the PIRC report, do you think now, looking at it in light of the email, that perhaps that's a mistake?
I do, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and when you showed me the email, I don't recall reading that email in the last few months,
Right.
which, you know, obviously
Thank you.
information was made available for the Rule 8.
Thank you. So, did you rely on the PIRC report when you
For-
completed your statement?
Well, amongst a number of other areas, yes, my notebook and the book, yes,
All right.
yes, and my previous statements, yes.
But if you were on holiday, there wouldn't be any information in your notebook?
No, but I'd be made aware when I come back that there was, yes, because, I mean, maybe come on to it, but the matter regarding the criminal conduct allegation made by
Thank
Mr
you.
Sightseed, I undertook that part of the investigation.
Thank you. And can we look at PIRC 04153, which is the policy log that Mr McSporran created, and look at decision 57? Now this was created on the 3rd of July, so the date after the email Crown Office instruction, and it refers specifically to the instruction from Crown
Yes.
Office, Crown Office instruction, and it says item 3 is an instruction to investigate Saeed's allegation made by Mr. Anwar of criminal conduct by
Yes.
police officers when dealing with them, and raise actions and investigate, interview officers, interview Saeed. He's never previously made these allegations, and obtain a statement as to why he says
Yes.
why he says happened. And now, does that seem to suggest that the letter of instruction or the email of instruction from Crown at that point related to Saeed's allegations?
Well, that, yes, absolutely, yes.
And that's consistent with the email I've shown you from
Yes.
the second. And I've just received a message that we can confirm the redaction confirms you were on annual leave between the 29th of June and the 12th of July.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me move on then, because I'd like to move on to the next letter of instruction that I have. And this is from, well, it relates to a letter from the Crown on the 24th of August 2015. So can I ask you to look at COPFS 02768A. And you'll see that on the screen. Now this on the screen is a letter from the Crown Office, criminal allegations against the police division,
Yes.
to Kate Frame, the
Yes.
Commissioner. And it's dated the 24th of August 2015. And you'll see that it, if we can look at the page, in terms of section 33A of the 2006 Act, I write to ask you to carry out an investigation in relation to the circumstances in relation to attached correspondence from Amar Anwar. I have today written to the Deputy Chief Constable to advise them that I have instructed you to take forward the investigation into this case, and I've asked him to facilitate a handover of the investigation to you. So it's a letter from Les Brown, Head of the Criminal Allegations Against Police Division, to the Commissioner, dated the 24th of August.
Yes.
And do you recognise that letter as a further letter of instruction from the Crown?
Yes, it's a further, yes, sorry.
And then if we look, as we scroll down, you'll see the attachment
Yes.
to this letter.
Yes.
Now, this is a letter on Mr. Anwar's headed notepaper.
Yes.
It's dated the 31st of July 2015. So it's his letter of the 31st of July sent to PIRC by the Crown on the 24th of August.
Yes.
And it's a copy of a letter that was originally said to be sent to Mr. Stephen House, the then Chief Constable of Police Scotland.
Yes.
And it relates to the death of Sheku Bayo in police custody.
Yeah.
And as we scroll through, you will see that it spills onto a fourth page. So that's page 2 we see.
Yes.
And then keep going, you'll see the last page is just at the top of page 4. And this is a letter that was sent by Mr. Anwar to the Chief Constable,
Yes.
which it appears the Crown have put a covering letter on it and attached it and sent it to PIRC.
Yes, I remember that.
Now, if we can go back to page 3 of the July letter, or sorry, well, let's start at page 2 actually. Item 6 at the bottom, there's reference to matters involving data protection, which I'll
Yes.
come on to at a later stage. A list of names are given, starting at the bottom of that page and moving on to the top of page 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then at paragraph 7, there's a request for an audit to be carried out for Alan Payton, who we've heard is one of the officers who attended Hayfield Road, and other officers for access to personal data, as the Bayo family are seriously concerned, with regards to the serious allegations made to them. So there's mention of that there.
Yes.
Now, I would like you to look at another letter that is the same date. So this is the letter that's attached to the Crown Office
Yes.
instruction. Could you also look for me, please, at COPFS 04726A? Now, this letter is also written by Amar Anwar on headed paper. It's also dated the 31st of July, but this letter is sent to the Commissioner for the attention of John McSporran and Kate Frame. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
Now, if we look at the last page of this letter, do we see it's actually 11 pages, so it's substantially longer.
Yes.
The copied letter that Crown copied to PIRC spilled onto a fourth page, but as you'll see, the end of this letter is 11 pages. We'll see that if we go to the very bottom of the page,
Yes,
you'll see it's got 11 at the bottom. And towards the final part of that letter, do we see it wasn't just sent to the Commissioner for the attention of McSporran and Frame, but it was also CC'd to the then Lord Advocate,
Yes.
Commissioner, Les Brown at Crown Office, Lindsay Miller, who is a fiscal with, at that time, organised crime and counter-terrorism.
Yes.
There's quite a difference in length between these two letters, and I don't plan to go through every single paragraph with you. But would it appear on the face of it that Mr. Anwar has sent an 11-page letter to PIRC,
Yes.
copied to Lord Advocate, a 4-page letter to the Chief Constable,
Yes.
but the letter which has been forwarded to PIRC by the Crown and which the instructions are based on is the Chief Constable 4-page letter,
On the face of it, yes. Just, yeah.
not the letter that was sent to PIRC,
No.
direct. I'd like to look at some of the differences between these letters and see what impact, if any, it made
Okay.
on what PIRC were doing in the investigation. So let's look again for a moment at the Crown Office letter of instruction, 24th August, COPFS 02768A. Now, if you could take it from me, this is the Chief Constable letter that's attached to this.
Yes.
There's no reference to race in the Chief Constable letter. If you can take that from me
Okay,
for the
yeah,
moment.
without reading it, yes, okay.
So, in terms of the instruction received from the Crown, there's no instruction on page 1, the covering letter from the Crown, about race. And there's no reference to race in the Chief Constable's letter that's copied and attached.
Okay.
In terms of instructions from Crown, what impact did that letter have on your investigation?
Well, Crown is formally instructing us to undertake investigation into the points that are raised by Mr. Anwar.
Right. So in the absence of a formal instruction in relation to race attached to that letter,
Yeah.
what authority did PIRC have to investigate race at that time?
Well, they hadn't received a formal instruction. If that's, and I've obviously got mixed up with the email, but that's, yeah, we've not received a formal instruction, but we have undertaken matter into race.
However, in the other letter that Mr. Anwar sent to PIRC
Yes.
direct, so this is COPFS 04726A, this is the 11-page letter.
Yes.
Can we look at page 2, please, paragraph 11? It also has been alleged that this is the letter from Mr. Anwar. This officer has a history of racism from a young age. Can you advise whether that has been checked and considered? For instance, have family members such as his mother, father and sister been interviewed in the same way as Mr. Bio's family were to assist the investigation? Yes. And if we could also look at the paragraph 23, that's on page 4. Can you advise whether PIRC has identified the primary contentious features in this case, including restraint and race? This would not be to prejudge the investigation or with the purpose of ruling those issues in or out, but to make clear the PIRC is aware of and has identified the primary concerns and issues that need to be examined, and to put on public record that the PIRC recognises the important questions and issues to explore and is there to conduct a robust investigation will go some way to satisfying the family as well as public interest and concern about his death. And 24, if we move up, has PIRC investigated if any of the 9 officers involved were involved in the race case investigated by Fife Police Division between 2014 and 15 regarding text messages? Paragraph 26. As you will be aware that we are receiving assistance from Inquest, a charity that deals with deaths in custody, many of the cases they have worked on have presented disturbing images of violence and racism, ascribing to black people stereotypical characteristics of extraordinary strength, dangerousness and criminality, thus attempting to blame the victim for their own death either by their pathological condition or their personal choice. And then moving on to page 5, second paragraph. Well, the first paragraph talks about violence and risks. Second paragraph says in the context of black deaths in custody, the issue of racism has not been referred to by the PIRC or included in the terms of reference. Why not? The next paragraph, you will be aware that evidence of racial stereotyping by the Met led to a most damaging censure of the police when a public inquiry attributed the bungled police investigation into the racist murder of Stephen Lawrence to institutionalised racism. And then the next paragraph, the Bio family is concerned with that racial stereotyping may have been a contributory factor in the death of Sheku Bio, resulting from restraint, use of force. The question of racism has from the very beginning been the elephant in the room. Can you advise how this forms part of the investigation process? Then in paragraph 27 there's mention of violent and aggressive and the use of language and value-laden terms. So you can see in relation to this much longer letter there are a number of references
Yes,
to
absolutely,
race.
absolutely.
Do you remember PIRC receiving that letter? Have you ever seen that letter?
I remember in the context, there was a letter received from Mr Anwar that had 50 odd points or whatever, and I believe that was answered by the Commissioner.
This is 53 paragraphs
so, yeah,
about points that are raised.
And I remember when we received the instruction from Crown, and as you said it was front sheeted, I was a bit concerned, saying, so is this how Crown instruct us now, to just put a front sheet on a letter and send it to us and say investigate that, which to me is no, please conduct investigations under terms of section such and such and investigate the following, which is the normal manner in which we get it, you know that. When you, some of the other items you identified there in relation to going about race, obviously examination of the, you know, were any of the 9 principal officers involved in the incident involving the 3 officers and 5, that was areas that we looked at, that was an area that you know, that we looked at. Did I see that at the time, or when I saw that? I don't know. My recollection is the first that the family raised the area of race was at the meeting with the Commissioner, which was just a couple of days after that. I think is that dated the 31st of August?
That's the 31st of July.
Oh, 31st is I, so we're actually, sorry, a month later.
The letter's the 31st, both letters are the 31st of July from Mr.
Yes.
Anwar. The Crown Office instruction letter is dated the 24th of August. 24th of August. Okay. So his letters are the 31st of July. The Crown get in touch with the Commissioner on the 24th of August.
24th of August?
Yes.
And then there was a meeting with the family just, was it a week after that? Started?
I think the beginning of September. I'm about to say the 2nd, but I might be wrong.
I think it was, my recollection is the 2nd. Sorry, I'm just, well, I don't have my date book there for that date.
Well, we've got your date book if that would assist you. Sorry. It's PIRC 04521. Unfortunately, I think it's on screen rather than a hard copy.
Sorry, thank you.
But if we look for the 2nd of September, which will be towards the end of that book. Sorry, I don't have a page number to give you at this stage.
Yeah, I understand about the meeting on the 2nd of September, and that's where, to the best of my recollection, that was the first that the family raised, certainly with myself, about the matter of race. What would be interested to see is the page of when the letter was received by the Commissioner.
I think what we may be better doing is, rather than scrolling through the screen,
Yes.
hoping to spot something, is to get hard copy for you, Mr.
Okay.
Little, and we'll do that overnight. Can we look at the policy log? This might be of
Yeah,
some
please.
assistance as well, please. This is PIRC 04153. And if we can look at item 64.
Thank you.
And you'll see this is an entry made on the 25th of August, so the day after
Yes.
the Crown Office letter we've been looking at. It's an instruction from Crown Office: investigate all the circumstances set out in the letter from Mr. Amar to Crown Office. But you'll recall that the letter that was attached to the Crown Office instruction was the one that Mr. Amar sent to the Chief Constable,
Yes.
the 4-page letter.
Yes.
But in this regard, the inquiry will now progress the following main lines of inquiry, and actions will be raised accordingly. Number 1, race. Examine whether race or racism, institutional racism within the Fife area of Police Scotland and in the approach of individual officers played any part in or impacted on how officers dealt with Shekabayo. 2, in pursuance of the last examine the PSD,
Yes.
that's Professional Services Department, standards,
Yes.
of officers involved in incident for racist or discriminating behaviour and report accordingly. 3, examine the PSD history of PCL and Peyton and
Yes.
historic incidents, allegations of assault. 4, undertake an audit of Police Scotland IT systems operational in Fife to determine if the 9 officers or any officers unlawfully accessed the date of that should be data of the persons named in the letter. And 5, correspond with Mr. Anwar, setting out Scottish position in law regarding conferring, collusion, resignation, compulsion about providing statements, IPCC position contrasted with PIRC Scottish system. Now, can we look at the start of that? If that was seen as the instruction from Crown Office,
Yes.
which is noted by John McSporran on the day after the letter's sent, 25th of August,
Yes.
and he mentions race and racist issues to be investigated, that presumably must have come from the letter that Amar Anwar sent direct to the Commissioner,
Yes.
rather than the terms of reference in the letter of instruction from the Crown to PIRC.
Yes.
So it's been interpreted at some point by Mr. McSporran that as of that date, PIRC were instructed by Crown to investigate race. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And that's probably based on the letter that Mr. Anwar sent PIRC, dated the 31st of July. And I say that advisedly, that's the letter he sent to PIRC,
Yes.
dated the 31st of July. So this would have been the first point at which it was recognised that the family, through Mr.
Yes.
Anwar, were concerned about race, and although there seems to have been some mix-up here with the letters, from that stage, PIRC were instructed, or considered themselves instructed by the Crown, to investigate race.
Yes.
Thank you. And as a result of that, it would appear from the daybook, at least, that certain steps were then instigated in relation to investigating race.
Sorry, from my daybook.
From this daybook, it
Yeah.
appears that PIRC
Okay.
were then certain
Yep.
steps were ordered in relation to investigating these issues of race.
Right, but not on the 25th of August for myself.
I think we're talking about the policy log
The
rather than
policy
the
Oh,
log,
sorry,
sorry, because I was down
s-
in London
sorry.
in the 25th of August. That's what I'm just
Excuse
looking
me,
at
I
here.
realise that.
Yeah.
I've made a mistake. I'm talking about the document on the screen,
Oh,
which
the
is the
document screen.
policy
Thank
log.
you. Yes.
Sorry,
yes,
my
I understand
mistake.
that. Yeah.
So at least from the 25th of August and the entry in the policy log by John McSporran,
Yes.
he took the view that PIRC were now instructed to investigate race,
Yes.
and that then resulted in certain actions being required. So it was from this moment
Right.
that PIRC started to pursue particular lines of investigation directed towards the issue of race.
Okay. So over the passage of time, I apologise. I've made a mistake in my Rule 8 in respect of that. I said you lifted that from the, whether that was a mistake, we lifting that date from the such line. But my recollection is for myself was the first that the matter of race was raised that I was aware of, and I fully take that, was on the meeting with Miss Frame on, I think, the 2nd. Right. I can see certainly just quickly looking at my statement I made, my second statement I made to Crown, that I was away on the 25th. I was down in London, actually meeting with Dr. Karch on that date. Right, so I wasn't about on the 25th of August. Where I was in the preceding, the days after that, it's not quite clear here, although I certainly have on the Friday 28th of August, I handed CCTV footage over to Mr. Brown. I was certainly, yeah, but that's my recollection. That's my,
All
I'm
right.
not doubting that. I'm not doubting that.
And then can we look at COPFS 02557? And this is another letter from the Crown. All right. There might be a slight glitch with the computer. We can resolve that tomorrow. But essentially my understanding is that there was a subsequent letter sent by the Crown, which I'll be able to show you tomorrow,
Okay.
sent to the Commissioner, dated the 2nd of September. And I think if we look at your inquiry statement, paragraph 222, there's reference to this. So it's paragraph 222 of 421. And you'll see there, if we can go back to 221 actually, we can see reference to the letter. On the 2nd of September, Crown Office wrote to the Commissioner, were you aware of this correspondence at the time or subsequently? And you do recall this further instruction, and then we can move on to the next paragraph 222. The letter asked the Commissioner to confirm that issues of race and whether there was any evidence of racial motivation was a primary focus in the PIRC investigation. And your response is, I have no recollection as to what I understood back in 2015. What I can confirm is that from the outset the matter of race was under consideration at all times. But my understanding is, we'll be able to look at this tomorrow, the Commissioner put in writing a query whether evidence of racial motivation was a primary focus in the PIRC investigation. And regardless of any mistakes or confusion that had arisen previously, this was the first letter from the Crown that specifically raised the issue of race and asked PIRC to investigate.
Okay.
Or
So it was much later than what I, yeah.
Would you accept that that could have been the
Yes.
point at which
Yes.
there was a formal letter or a
Yes.
formal correspondence from Crown
Yeah.
asking about the issue of race?
Yeah, and I
And
do
I-
see that in my response to 221, I'm able to say that a number of actions were handed out on the or were raised in 8 September in response to that.
Is this in the policy law?
No,
or
no,
will it be-
in my response to question 221.
Oh, I see. I do recall as further instruction, the changes it made is that each of the points was allocated out for action to a number of the a member, presumably,
Yeah.
of the investigation team, detailed within my daybook entries dated 8 September 2015. So there were actions taken after that
Yeah, there's
instruction.
instructions, yes.
And then you'll see as we move down the page that there is a reference at 223 to a meeting that took place
Yes, this is the
between the
meeting I was talking
Commissioner
about, yes.
and the family, their solicitor, John Mitchell, Alistair Lewis, Michael Tate, and yourself, Mr. Little.
Yes,
And that was on the 3rd of September.
yes.
And you come on to that and the different aspects. I wonder if that might be an appropriate time to...
Yes, well, we'll stop there and continue the evidence tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.